Hello, I'm Frank Jernigan, but you can call me Franco. I'm the developer of the website franco.com. Welcome to my fifth lesson in my mini-series on traveling stitches. In this lesson, we're going to take up the final version of a traveling stitch, which is really quite rare in usage. It's a horizontal traveling stitch. I've only seen it in one pattern, and that was in this book, Traditional Danish Sweaters. There is one star or two stars in this book that use the pattern, and I decided to incorporate one of the patterns into my next sweater that I'm going to be publishing in Cast On magazine. Here is the swatch that I generated as I was planning the sweater. And if you notice, there are horizontal traveling stitches. They are, let's see if I can figure out how to do this. This one here is horizontal, and this one here is horizontal. I can't do it. Anyway, you can see the horizontal traveling stitches, and they were based around this star motif that appeared in the book. There we go. See the star? I started from that, and I worked out an entire pattern to put into the sweater. So why would you want to learn to do a horizontal traveling stitch? Well, because I think they're fun, and I was pretty excited to find out there was a new way to do a traveling stitch, and that's why I decided to incorporate it into my next pattern. The traveling stitch is unusual in that you have to have one stitch to set up the traveling stitches, then you knit as many horizontal traveling stitches as the pattern calls for, and then you have a different stitch to end the series of horizontal traveling stitches. The book is by Vivian Hawksbrough, and she has instructions in it how to do all three of these stitches, and a fourth one that we will also be talking about. And I have adapted her instructions according to my own experience knitting that sweater. I think I picked up a few tips about easy ways to do it, or an easy way to do it. And it fits in with the other things I've been teaching in the class. If you've noticed, all of my crossover traveling stitches have been done without using cable needles, by simply exchanging two stitches on the needles, just exchanging the position of the first and second stitch on the left needle before you then work the stitches. And of course there's also the triple crossover, the three traveling stitch crossover, where you actually exchange the third stitch with the first two stitches. But take a look at that video. That's lesson 4. So I would like to show you how I chose to diagram it for the pattern that I'll be publishing, and people who are going to knit my sweater will be coming here to see exactly what this looks like in chart, and also how to do it. There are no standard symbols for these stitches, so they had to be invented. Vivian Hawksbrough had some that she did. I tried to get as close to those as I could using stitchfiddle.com, but I wasn't able to exactly reproduce them, but it came pretty close. So let me show you more closely what they look like. Here's just a section of one part of the pattern. In fact, it's the sleeve motif. This motif will be on the sleeve cap leading down to this cable going down the sleeve. And this is one section of the motif for illustration purposes. In the chart, here, of course, is the horizontal line of traveling stitches. This represents the beginning stitch. This represents the end stitch. The end stitch is actually pretty simple. It's either a knit two together or a purl two together. In this case, it's a purl two together because it's in a bed of purl stitches. So the final stitch is nothing new. Everything else is new. The knit stitch is a knit front back, followed by a transfer of one stitch from the right needle to the left needle. That stitch that's transferred is again transferred after every single stitch until you get to the end, when that stitch that was transferred the last time is then knitted together with, or purled together with, one stitch at the end. So this symbol represents knit front and back and then transfer one stitch to the left needle. These are the horizontal stitches, which I will be telling you about in 4 steps. This is a crossover stitch where a vertical stitch is coming up and could extend all the way up this line and passes over the horizontal line of stitches. That looks like this in practice. Here's a vertical line of stitches. Here's a horizontal line of stitches, and the vertical line passes over the horizontal line right here. I've knitted a small swatch to illustrate all of these techniques, and so I'll just use this to show you how it's done. This little swatch is as one vertical line going up the center, and I did a couple of rows of horizontal stitches across it, and that's what they look like. And so we'll do another row like that. I started the swatch with 3 stitches of garter stitch, just so the edges don't fold over and make it difficult to see what I'm doing. Then there was a background of purl stitch, so let me just purl one, and then in the next one I'm going to start my horizontal traveling stitch. That stitch was oriented incorrectly, sorry. In order to do the beginning, before your very first horizontal traveling stitch, you knit into the front and back of a stitch, like that. And then you transfer one stitch back to the left needle, like that. Then you come to your first horizontal stitch. The first step, step 1, exchange the first 2 stitches on the needle, with the second stitch being exchanged from behind the first stitch. So the first stitch passes over the second stitch. This is just like a left traveling stitch crossover. We then knit the first stitch normally. Then we knit the second stitch through the back loop. That second stitch is our first horizontal stitch. We transfer it back to the left needle when we're done. And there you can see one horizontal traveling stitch. Let's do another one. Exchange the first 2 stitches on the needle. Step 2, knit the first stitch. Step 3, knit the second stitch through the back loop. Step 4, transfer the stitch back to the left needle. And there you have the 4 steps for knitting the horizontal traveling stitch. We now come to the line of vertical stitches, and in order to have the vertical stitch cross over the top of the horizontal stitch, we again start by exchanging the first 2 stitches on the needle, but we put the vertical line in front of the horizontal stitch. So we bring it to the front, exchange the 2 stitches, and then we simply knit the stitch through the back loop, which twists it and continues the vertical line. That's all it takes to do a vertical crossover horizontal stitch. We're now ready for another horizontal stitch. So again, we exchange the 2 stitches on the left needle, putting the second one behind the first one. We then knit the first stitch through the front loop, and then knit the second stitch through the back loop, and then transfer that stitch back to the left needle. And one more time, we exchange this second stitch behind the first stitch. Exchange is complete. Step 2, knit the first stitch. Step 3, knit the second stitch through the back loop. And step 4, transfer the stitch back to the left needle. Let's say we're now ready to end the line of traveling stitches, and so all we need to do is either knit them together, knit 2 together, or purl 2 together. Since I'm working on a purl background, I'll purl the 2 together. The chart actually distinguishes whether you should knit or purl, but you can use your own judgment and probably do it correctly. It actually looks better after you work another row or 2, but that's what we have. So that's how you do a horizontal traveling stitch, starting with a knit through the front and back loop and transfer 1 stitch over to the left needle. Then you work your horizontal stitches. When you come to a vertical stitch, you want it to pass over, so you exchange the horizontal stitch with the vertical stitch on the left needle, putting the vertical stitch in front. Then you work the vertical stitch through the back loop. Now you're ready to go on to your next horizontal stitch. And when you reach the end of your line of horizontal stitches, you knit 2 together or purl 2 together as your chart shows you. So there is the horizontal traveling stitch. If you've enjoyed this series on traveling stitches, please subscribe to my channel. And just also click the thumbs up down below and tell your friends about it. How about putting a word out on Facebook or somewhere else? And you're welcome to come to franco.com, where you can generate sweater patterns for a custom fit sweater designed to your measurements and your yarn gauge. Happy knitting.